Hey, good morning,
Good
everybody.
morning.
How are we
I'm
doing?
doing great.
How are you doing,
I'm
Kevin?
doing really great. How about yourself?
Oh, I am doing all right. Having all of a sudden, immediately have a technical glitch on my side, but that's exactly how you should expect these
Yeah,
days to go.
yeah.
Oh,
Man, it,
all
it feels
right.
like forever since I've been here.
Yeah, you missed out on a good show last week. We had the
Power
uh
Mates.
Power
Yeah.
Mates on. Yes. It's like Fabric Mates? That's
No,
not
I
right.
think
Power
Power
Mates.
Mates. Yeah, I listened in. I
Yeah, yeah.
enjoyed it. As you mentioned, I had a just a regular doctor's appointment, and on my way there, and while waiting in the room, I had it in my headset or in my earbuds, and they did great. So it was a good show. So if anybody hasn't seen it, then go back and take a look at it.
Yeah, 100%. It was fantastic, and I mean, people are always wondering. Like, there's so much out there in fabric. Where do you start? Frankly, start with where you're at and what you're trying to do. Right, like take one step out. If you have an issue or you have a need, figure out that piece of it.
Hmm.
Don't necessarily try to figure out everything because you're just not going to be able to do that. Right?
That is true. That is true. And that'll kind of touch on what we have going on today, you know. But before we get into that topic, I hear you got some gifts.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for bringing that up. So uh, this showed up on my doorstep, and I thought I'd open it up quickly, show you guys the value of like commenting and doing stuff in social media. Um, about a month ago, I got this DM from one of the Microsoft Twitter accounts saying, "Hey, thanks so much for contributing to the community. We'd love to send you some swag." I think Donald or Mark Walter, I think I saw you got
Hmm.
some of this stuff too. So I'm just going to open this up. I've not yet seen exactly what's inside of here, so we'll take a look at it. Um, so open it up. We've got a little note saying, "Hello, congratulations." I got a cool. Okay, what is this? It's a Microsoft mug. Right,
Nice.
see that? That's kind of cool. I like that. A little box. We'll open that in a second here. Another box. Let's see what that is. Microsoft T-shirt. Can I pull this out so you can see it?
Oh,
That's kind of
yeah,
cool.
there you go. Yeah. Is there anything on the
All right.
back or just the front logo?
And then a little Microsoft sticker, a bag, a swag bag. So that's kind of cool.
Oh,
Carry
a
your
little different
carry your
design
stuff
on
to
the
the
other side.
beach.
That was nice.
Oh yeah. A little pattern there
Hmm.
for you. Um, then we got, what is this? Ooh,
Is it a speaker?
it's a Bluetooth
Nice.
speaker. Come on, tune in. Oh, that's awesome. And then what's the last thing we got here? Last little thing.
Is it
Let's
like
see
just
here.
the charging cords and stuff, or is it a battery pack? What's it gonna
I
be?
think it's a battery pack.
Oh, just tear the
Come
box.
on.
You don't need it.
Oh, look at that. That is cool.
Blue. Oh, is that a
It's
battery
a
pack
battery
with
pack
in a wooden case?
in a wooden
That
case.
is, yeah. I've never.
Oh, with the like wireless charger,
Yeah,
so I could like charge my phone by just setting it on there.
no, that's pretty
Oh,
cool.
freaking awesome, man.
So,
That's
a word of
incredible.
advice to anybody, because Chris showed me that he had this box. We didn't know what was in it, and I asked him how he got it, and he said, "Well, randomly, I had an account on Twitter reach out to me, and I go." Oh yeah, I had that too. And when I first got it, it was like late in the night or something like that. I was like, "Well, is this spam? Is this not?" And I meant to look into it, and I totally forgot. So, um,
So don't
yeah,
forget, like that's legit stuff, you know.
learn from my mistake.
I'm kind of excited about that. Yeah.
Very nice.
um. So welcome everybody in the chat. I see. Oh, Mr. Saxton. Hey, welcome. Mark, Simon, Christian. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Want to hear what you guys are doing this 4th of July weekend? If you're in the States, this is our Independence Day celebration. So kind of excited about a longer weekend for a lot of us. We're off to the like the 4th. Many of us won't be coming back to work until the 5th.
Mhm.
So what do you got going on this weekend? Leave it in the chat. Are you barbecuing? Are you going to the fireworks? Are you doing anything else? Kevin, you got anything going on this weekend?
No, I have actually client duties on Monday, so I don't have much of a long weekend. So it's kind of broken up, right? Just a regular weekend, then some client stuff on Monday, and then off on Tuesday. So we haven't put
Okay.
our full plans together or anything, but I'm sure we'll do a couple things here and there. So
Oh, that's fantastic. Uh, we have a dog trainer coming over the weekend. Dax is for those of you who don't know, Dax was actually in an airplane crash when he was 7 weeks old. So he's been exorbitantly skittish and afraid of like everything in the world. But we've got a dog trainer who's much more of a Chris trainer, and helping me learn how to get Dax more acclimatized to the world. So she's coming over this weekend. We're looking forward to spending time with that. And I do have great news though. Dax is now taking walks 2 times a day, and we go out into the park. It's fantastic. He is loving it. So he's really getting over his fear of the world. So that's awesome. So um looks like we have a whole bunch of things coming in. Holy cow.
Well,
Whoa, Adam, buying a house this
yeah,
weekend?
that's huge, right?
Yeah. Like I hope there's room for horses and there'll be a fence, right?
I think he mentioned on his live stream, right, that that's one of the reasons they're looking at moving. They love where they were, but they want more room for the animals and everything. So
Oh, that's great. And Andy Cutler is going to be doing a barbecue tonight. Fantastic, Andy. Would love to hear, what are you barbecuing? Like, are you doing ribs? Are you doing brisket? Are you just doing like hot dogs, hamburgers, that type of stuff? Um, and then we have the traditional fireworks with my daughter. Oh, that's wonderful. That is what it's all about, right?
it definitely
We got
is.
swimming in pools with Donald. How wonderful. And
Yes, he's not in the US. So I was
oh,
wondering if
good
he had a
deal.
beer or a wine with him right now because I know it's his late evening time. So
Well, he says it's in the middle of his workday,
oh,
so
okay, is it
probably
okay?
not yet. Yeah. And then we got our LinkedIn crew has started to show up. We've got Joe. He's going to be swimming in Texas. That's pretty hot there.
Yeah,
That's
it is
cool.
really hot here.
Yeah. And Mark is celebrating a 50th birthday. How awesome is that? Oh, that's great. Great, great, great.
Yeah,
Well,
coworker. He put cook worker, I meant coworker. That was the second most.
yeah. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that's what he meant there. So hey, Andy, thanks so much for all the great content you're putting out. Me and Kevin were talking about some of your videos and the stuff that you've been doing over the last week. Honestly, it's just fantastic. If you're not following Andy on like LinkedIn and Twitter, I'm going to post his LinkedIn page here inside of the chat. Please do do check him out. He's got some great stuff on domains. I think we're going to be going into that in a week or two. We're
Mhm.
going to be hitting that as well. So, but he's got some great stuff out there.
Yeah,
All
he's
right.
a great
Uh,
contributor to the community, so definitely follow that.
yeah, yeah. And then one other thing that I just saw that Kevin, I want us to talk about at some point in time. Stephen Russell has posted some blog posts about using notebooks and extracting APIs and whatnot. I'm posting that inside of the chat. Uh, do check that out. It is fantastic. I would love. I need to know more about notebooks because that's an area I'm super
I
lacking.
I think I
So,
marked that one as well, Chris. I remember kind of
oh,
seeing
cool.
that, and I'm very interested in that because I think it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for things. And um,
Yeah. Yep. 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 Now we do have a few rules, and before we jump into it, like, hey, we're here to talk with you. Well, because we both, Kevin and I, learned so much from interacting with you, thinking about what's driving us in our business, sharing that with yourselves. It really helps us think through the process. So we want to hear your questions, but we do have a handful of rules on this. We are going to be following Guy in the Cube, the rules. So, hey, if you do have a question, please make sure that you preface the question with a Q, so we can queue those up. So it's easy for us to find those. It's a live stream. we don't have a huge production house behind us. It's me and Kevin trying to do all this stuff as we go. So Q really helps us call out the questions you want asked on the live stream. And then rule number 2, please don't spam or repeat questions. Moderators, the people with the little icons or the little gears, the little wrenches on them. They will be kind of watching for people that might start to spam the queue, and they'll like kind of put you on a timeout. And we don't want to really have to do that because we got a great audience, and that's not something that we do. So do put those questions in the queue. We're happy to get to those as they come in. Okay.
And I see
we can share Andy.
We have a question already, but we're going to kind of touch on Rakesh's question. Hopefully, I said that right. In the topic I have lined up for us today. So if we want to just kind of hold off on that and see if it covers
head on over to the desktop.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so today I put together a couple slides, and sorry if anybody that doesn't like slideware, based upon looking at some possible scenarios. And this actually came to me from talking with Mark Waters, who's on our chat today. Because he kind of asked me that. We have a crew that a lot of people know about. We call them Saturday Morning Learning. When we get together every Saturday morning prior to the Guy in a Cube live stream, and we talk and bring things up, and they help feed me a lot of these ideas, me and Chris, a lot of these ideas on what to bring up on these Fabric Fridays. And he asked a question. He goes, well, what do you think you'll go through end-to-end scenarios? And since I had a couple weeks to think about and put something together for this one, I thought, well, maybe it was a good time for me to put some time into it and go through that. So let me click to make sure I go through. I went through too far, I think.
Well, that was impressive.
Oh, no. It was okay. This is the first slide. Sorry, my next slide is way over here. Okay. Okay. I have a project definition that is coming into us, and we're going to utilize this project definition and look at the multiple ways we could implement it, right? So this is going to kind of be how requirements come into you. And we're going to base these requirements on Kerball's 25 Days of DAX or 2022 edition. If you haven't followed Ruth before over at Kerball, at her Kerball site, for the last 2 years, she's done an exercise of trying to help people improve their DAX skills with these 25 days of DAX. So you come out with 25 questions, and you could, you're free to kind of answer them any way you want and submit your DAX, to have a leaderboard and everything. This one was all about the World Cup. She took the data from GitHub and credited Joshua here. So Joshua has been maintaining that data. Hopefully, again, I'm saying that right. My names are always off, so it's an old bad habit of mine. So we want to definitely credit that GitHub site with where the data is coming from. Okay, so we want to answer those 25 questions, and we might have to do data cleansing, modeling, kind of pull it all together, right? That's pretty much what we're given for this exercise. One of the examples of cleansing is we have to clean up the birth dates because some of them have dates and some of them also have not available as the text in there, right? So we need to be able to handle that. So while doing this exercise, okay, so here's the questions. I'm not going to cover every one of these questions. I didn't put all of them together, but this again is just kind of running out. Here's what your requirements are. You have to be able to answer these 25 questions. I think I picked questions from day 1 through 3 and also day 13 that I'm going to show you in my examples here. You could take all this data, you could bring it into Fabric either through the patterns that I'm showing or other ways to kind of also play with it yourself. All right. So back when this came out, we really just had Power BI. We had other things available to us, but it's a Power BI question. So pretty much everybody solved the problem using Power BI. So what would that look like, right? So imagine the yellow box here would be either a PBIX file or a workspace up on the service. So our solution would look like we'd produce a data set for those not remembering, right? These are our new icons that you see up on the service for data set. And then this is the Power BI report. So this could all be within one PBIX, right? PBIX. Or we could go up onto the service and produce a data flow and then produce the PBIX and publish the data set and the report over there. Pretty common ways of doing everything. And that was how I kind of did it when I got into the whole exercise early on.
Well, and remember, right? Like that's just a natural evolution because those data flows just came directly from your data sets. So whatever you're loading into your data set, you extracted that Power Query out, dumped into data flow. So you could load those separately into the service and then load those into your model. A great way to actually deal with like long load times and potentially
Yeah.
failures, right?
And I would say probably most people, just did the top one, right? Because it was, it was an exercise of learning something different, but, just kind of the art of possibility, right? So you're exactly right. You could just pull your Power Query out. There was a lot of interesting things if you go over to the Reddit site that came available with this, or find other comments on Twitter. A lot of people came up with interesting Power Query to solve one part of a problem with the sheer number of files that are up on that GitHub. I want to say there's 20 some odd CSV files up there, right? So the first kind of week or so, I remember a lot of people just talking about, hey, how am I going to bring in all these files and what do I do and how do I get it to be refreshable and stuff like that. So, again, Power Query was everybody's solution at that point, right? Whether it's in the data set or up on the service. Okay, so what can we do going with Fabric now? So let's think this through, right? So I kind of looked at it's really three scenarios because the first two are about the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I did separate it just a little bit there. Is we could do a data flow Gen 2 now that puts the data into a data lake. And so we're still in that Power Query mode, right? We're writing data flow Gen 2, which is in the Power Query language, let it go into the data lake. And then we could have a PBIX file, or a separated data set, data set, and the report going off of that. So that option is definitely there. And the one thing to point out, Chris, that I know there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of talk about people going, well, what should I use? What should I not use? The previous slide, all those options are still available. And so
Right.
if
Right.
that works for you, don't feel pressure that you have to go do something else, right? If it works for you, especially if you already have it in, just because the new shiny is out here. But if you want to learn, then start looking at other scenarios, right? Or
Right.
yeah.
And I think this goes into Rakesh's question about what's the difference between a data flow Gen 2 and a data pipeline?
Hmm.
When do you use it? When do you use which one? Right. And I think that speaks to what you're saying, right? Like if loading it directly into your data set works,
Hmm.
great, do that. If you're having problems or if you're starting to struggle, then start to look at like the Gen 2, right? Like bring that over there.
Right.
And then if you're if that's not meeting your needs, then you could take that that next step up into the data factory or the data
Right.
pipeline path, right? So think of it as a maturity in your process and only take that step, as you said, Kevin, when you're interested in learning about that next level, or the level you're on and what you're doing today isn't working
Right.
for you, right? And you're on that burning platform and you have to switch.
Yeah. And if you're working with a company that has put this in and they're trying to come up with their whole, let's call it their enterprise architecture on how they're going to want to do it, they should already be coming up with what are their guidelines, guardrails, best practices, or everything that they want to do within that particular company, and then decide on look at all these different patterns and decide, hey, do we want to standardize on pattern 1 or 2 or 3, right? or even say we're going to use this pattern in this situation. What I'd like to do a lot of times is say, here's going to be our preferred pattern, and then these patterns exist, and here's what you need to hit in order to change over to that pattern, right? Because in this way
Well,
you could turn over a whole lot easier.
and I think that's exactly right, and that applies. Adam kind of mentioned it, right? Like, think of it as Power Query Online versus Data Factory, but it's all part of one
Mm-hmm.
platform. It's all part of one evolution, and that even starts to get into what Joe's asking about. How is Fabric going to affect my BI team staffing plans? More people, fewer, different skill sets. Um,
I love that question.
and I think yeah, I think, Kevin, that talks to the need to have architects to come in and and broader skill set architects or more architects to start laying out those preferred patterns, those preferred best practices, helping people understand, like, okay, hey, I'm doing this
Mm-hmm.
now. I'm having these issues. What should I do next? And what's the best path for me to move forward, right?
Yes. So I love that question because I'm of the opinion part of your standards or what you want your architecture to look like should include what people do I have, or hang on one second. Sorry. What people do I have, or what people do I want to try to recruit, right?
Right.
Where do you see the skill sets going, or what skill sets do you want to build in? Because if you're going to build in training programs within your organization and you're going to just try to teach everything, well, that's almost impossible, right? But if you're
Yep. Yep.
picking an architectural pattern that is, say, you want to depend on notebooks and Python, well, now you know that's what you're teaching, right? Or that's what you're recruiting. If you feel, and some of this is gut feel, there's HR things you can kind of look at to say, what do you see out in the industry? Is Python really big? Is SQL really big? Right. But you may have a lot of people on your team already that are full SQL developers. And so you may want to have a pattern that includes data warehouse because you want to reuse those skills. Right. So that's one way to kind of look at how do you want to set up your BI team. But you know, the other way, sorry, I just kind of lost my train of thought for whatever reason.
So
Yeah, go
let me
ahead, jump
chime
in
in
on that.
there as you like realign. Um, yes, you're going to have like this huge mass of people exist in the world that know SQL, and that's their bread and butter,
Hmm.
right? So that's the power of the Fabric is they can work and they can operate there. But we also have this growing mass of people that love to use
Hmm.
Python and yet love to use notebooks and all these new capabilities. And now in Fabric, you can have both of these teams and these people working together.
Yes.
This is a fantastic way to take SQL people and start to expose them to the Python world, and for Python people to start to expose them to the SQL world and the SQL best practices. And I always think of this as the whole Reese's peanut butter
Hmm.
cup thing, right? Like chocolate and peanut butter better together. Well, SQL and Python better together, right? Data and analytics better together. All these tools are better together inside of Fabric.
Yes, and where I was going, so thanks, Chris, allow my brain to reset a little bit. It is morning. Um, so the other thing is to think about is maybe you're not going to centralize as much into the BI team as before, right? Maybe the BI team, or what was known as the central BI team, takes on more of what the central data engineering team took on before, right? And you may, in your company, your overall company, have a federated staffing plan to where things move out to the business units, right? Get some people closer to the business, bring other business people into that, right? So that could be a different staffing model. And those business people may have different skills, right? They may not have all the Python and everything. So you could pick, you could say within your whole corporate architecture, here's our preferred pattern. Let's say it's our third one down, that it's going to be pipelines, notebooks into lake houses, and then forward from there. Well, you could even segment that out that the central team is going to use those skills. But then as you move to the federated team and the people in the business, it's easier to teach them SQL or whatever. You're going to then introduce the data warehouse and it may be into a different workspace. There are a lot of articles, there's a lot of conversation going on about what does a workspace structure look like in Fabric. And I don't think I haven't come up with a defined method for it yet, right? I've been reading a lot of other people's articles and stuff like that. I think we're going to see that over the next couple of weeks because there's a lot of really smart people studying this and thinking about it. But again, I don't think anybody's going to lock into one. You got to figure out what that looks like for your company.
And that's again goes into the whole depends thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, are you in a large company? Do you need like true isolation at every layer, at every step, at every process? If so, awesome. Build out an architecture and a strategy that does all of that. Are you in a small company? Are you the sole person who's going to be running this? If that's the case, keep this as simple as you possibly
Right.
can for yourself, right? Like if you need to segment, but if you don't. Just like everything that we do inside of our solutions, we've got to keep this as simple as we possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's going to depend on each one of us and the organizations we're in and the challenges that we're trying to
Yeah,
tackle,
and it may
right?
even come down to what source you're connecting to, right? Another person that's on our SML group, we were talking, and she was trying to use the Dataflow Gen 2 with a particular source, and she was running into problems. And she was getting good help from Microsoft support and everything, but she just couldn't get past it. And then her and I were kind of talking about it, and then she started changing to say, well, maybe I could use pipelines to get around the problem with this. And I think she started making progress with that one, right? So, that, like we kind of talked about, having a preferred solution, right, may not always work. And that may be why you have to go to a second or third type of pattern, right? But again, I always like to say, do it intentionally. Know why you're making those decisions, right? Don't just do it and then expect everybody else to, um, you know, support you on that, especially if you have a large team. So I love that team question. I think we will relook at how teams are structured, how we recruit
Yep.
in for teams, or, the best thing in any company is how to reuse. It sounds bad with saying it out loud, but how to pull others into your team that could be productive right away, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
training anybody on technology is the simple training, right? Training them on your business and understanding what's going on in those years of experience is a lot harder to do, right? And so if you could pull somebody in that understands your business and you teach them on the technology or use technology they already have because it's all in one place, you're going to have a better team. That's how I see the world.
Yeah, I agree. And so choosing your path, being specific, and heading as Booty is kind of alluding to, heading as directly towards your end goal is really
Mhm.
important, right? Not necessarily doing and that's everything and trying to touch on every space, but picking the path that's best for you. Um, and he's right. Like having the necessary number of layers for your individual solution is
Right.
key, right? I really like and do propose that like I talked about on Wednesday the medallion architecture, the bronze, silver,
Mhm.
gold, diamond layers, because that minimize the number of layers, because I've seen some architectures that went through and defined 27 layers of moving data. And like
Mm.
that I mean at each layer they did specific tasks, and that's good in principle, but in practice it becomes really
Yeah,
unwieldy.
it sounds like a maintenance issue.
Well, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. And it depends. If you're a super huge organization, if you have 250,000 people and your data team's 5,000 people, maybe that's not a problem, right? You got 500 people on each layer and
Mhm.
it's no big deal. Most of us don't operate in those conditions. So, like, don't design or plan for something like
Right.
that. Same thing with dev, test, production. I think that's a best practice on any place where you're going to be highly reliant and depending upon your data. You need that isolated space to do your
Mhm.
development, to break things, to experiment, right? But then you need that place for people to go in and say, yes, this is producing the right information. Yes, these analytics are right. Yes, this data can move into production, so you don't break anything,
Yeah.
right? But maybe you work in a smaller place, and just having a dev and prod is sufficient, right? Or you're that one guy shop, and it's 100 people there, and you know what? You have more than enough to do. You just live in production, and that's another thing. That's a reality for a lot of people.
And that is a reality for people, right? So, what is the
Mhm.
saying? Everybody has a test area, but some people also call it production. So
That's right.
you can definitely do it. People have gotten away with it.
Yep.
It comes down to what is your tolerance level, and when we get into contracts, we call them SLAs and everything like that. But if you're just at a particular, you're working for a company and you're the sole person and you only put it into production and everybody starts using it, you don't want to change around how things are. And they have a tolerance that go, well, if you break something, they're okay with you taking the day or whatever to fix it, then great, right? A lot of us that
Mhm.
come in as consultants or whatever, and we have these more stringent SLAs put onto us, we don't have that luxury. So we are going to push for a dev test prod because of that. But it doesn't mean it's for
Yeah.
everybody. Okay, so let's kind of go through the bottom three here. I did actually put together workspaces in Fabric, so we could kind of walk through those. But we talked a little bit about the data flow Gen 2 into Data Lake, then into using the default data set, and that's the one reason I moved the data set from the yellow side, the Power BI side, to the Fabric side. Is we just have that default data set, unlike what the default data set would be there in my first pattern up there, but we made an intentional decision to produce one outside. You can still do that. There's a lot of people looking at these default data sets. What is the performance of them, especially with Direct Lake? It's a great thing to be thinking about and everything. But again, look at it for how big your data is. Maybe you still don't, you only want to go to a data set outside, maybe even into another workspace or whatever that's shown in pattern one for refresh reasons or other reasons. And if it's small enough, why not? If it's, I know Direct Lake is a great thing from Microsoft, and we want to be able to use it, but use it as like everything else in the right, you know, combination of things. Okay, so then the item below that, right? I looked at bringing in the data, all those CSV files, the pipeline that I have up there first brings in the CSV files. Then I have a notebook that starts changing and cleansing those CSV files. And so on the pipeline, it brings it into a data lake. And that would be that top one. And you'll see I'm going to call that my bronze and silver data lake. I call it my bronze because the files I just put into the file area. You know what? Let me go and start showing these patterns a little bit in the
Yeah.
workspaces.
Let's go check
Yeah,
them out. Yeah, in the
yeah,
workspaces.
that might make a little bit more sense. So make sure I grab the right one, bring this over, and let's start from the top, right? So I have this called my World Cup data flow to Lakehouse. Um, data Gen 2 data flows now. This is a little bit of annoyance. A lot of people are talking about, but all of these first, what is it, 2, 4, 5 objects are created by default because of the data flow. So just ignore those. Um, but we have this Gen 2 data flow. We'll bring it up real quick. Hopefully, it may come up a little bit slow. And we just set the destination to go to the lake house, right? So I don't think I started Zoom it this morning. I'm sorry. So you can see, I have this many number of tables. What I found is as I was going through the exercises, right? Every time I needed a new table, I needed to come in, update this data flow, add the new object. It was, for me, it was a little bit tedious, right? Just because I know some other techniques to do everything. So from there, if we kind of take, oh yeah, they always want me to close this before moving on. So then
Did you want to close this?
if we take a
Yes, I want
look
to close.
at our lake house, right? So our lake house here, I created our lakehouse, which then produced the SQL endpoint, produced the data set. So we're going to open this in the lakehouse mode first. And we can see we have every one of those tables. I had some challenges with birthday, so I just kind of punted and produced a second table to make it easy on myself. But typically, you would only make it the one table. Okay, we're loading our preview. You can see.
I agree, Raphael. He's saying those additional objects should be hidden or not there. I would contend.
Yeah.
And
I think, I've seen a lot of conversations on Twitter about that. I believe there's an ideas item out there. I believe, the product team knows about that and is aware of it. I'm sure they're looking at it, and, they at first they weren't there. Then all of a sudden they started showing up. So hopefully they'll be able to hide them again for us. But
I think I saw a Rune comment on that when Mim posted a tweet about it, like, why is this here? This is annoying. And I think Arun or Amir responded saying that it's, they're working on that. They know about it, that it's going to go away. But straight up, like, if you got problems, like, go out to ideas.fabric.com, I think, and let them know, because they are actively listening. And in this preview time, changes are much easier.
Yes.
So.
And I agree with you that the top leaders have been extremely responsive on Twitter and other platforms they've been going to. It's amazing. So they are definitely dedicated to this, and I have so much respect for that. Okay, so again, just very simply, right, this is our lakehouse view. Let's switch over to the SQL endpoint, and then we'll see our kind of SQL view of this, and then it gives us, that we can produce the model. I didn't do a whole lot of modeling up here, but we just to know we have it in our default model, so we have just the same tables, different queries. This is one thing I was thinking about as I went through it, is because I set up this platform, and the exercise was to learn DAX. But if I didn't know DAX and I just wanted to figure out what the answer was, and I knew SQL better, you can come in here and just use SQL, start querying it, and go, hey, this is the answer that I need to get, and then go work on your DAX to improve your DAX skills, right? So another kind of little bonus there. And then obviously you could go to your model. In some places I started building out relationships, other tables I just added into it. But these are just available to us, right? This is going to be in our direct lake mode. So anytime I just update those tables, the data set's going to update, and I'll get the new data. So with all of that, I'm able to come up, and you see I had
the wrong. Oops.
Oh.
Keep going, Kevin.
So let's see.
I had the wrong URL for the Fabric Ideas site. I'm posting in the chat so you guys get the right one. So.
Okay. So all of that, right? If we look at the lineage of this report now, because this is the one report that I produced, and you could see that it just comes up with, here's the report. It goes to our data set, which goes to this is showing the lineage for whatever reason going to the SQL endpoint, but we know from the other thing, it says it's direct lake, which is going to our lake house, right? So this is where we come out with the end solution here. The data flow itself, this is kind of interesting. Even though the data flow has a destination to that lake house, the lineage isn't showing that it's pushing it out there. That may be something we want to push out on ideas as well. I think that would be kind of nice if this was linked to say, hey, here's all our CSV files that we're pulling in, and you can see it's calling out each CSV file independently, going into the data flow, and then it would be nice if the lineage said, hey, that data flow is right into this lake house, because then that will give us this end-to-end here. We'll ignore that other lineage from there.
Agreed.
So just to prove that I did, get this connected all the way through, we'll bring up this report. And you can see that the 4 questions that I answered, I put up here on cards. And I verified these answers back with Kerbal's site. I am getting the right things, right? So this day 1 was extremely easy. I just had to look at one table. Everything was contained within one table. This one was pretty much the same thing. It was all within one table, not really having to do any data transformation, just the more complicated DAX to concatenate everything together. Then we started getting into years where I did need to start changing some of the data types to get the right dates and everything. And I have all that in the Power Query. We're not going to go through that step by step, just for a matter of time here.
Sure.
And then the last one is I had two tables I had to connect together in order to find, this question was like, who was the youngest player or something like that. So I had to find when the player had an appearance and what their date of birth was. And that was where that complication came from, removing not available in order to have an actual date. So I didn't get any issues on it. Again, normal Power Query, got all that done, right? So pretty nice. All right, so let's go look at what does everything look like on the second one, right? So we have, this is the World Cup just going into the lake house. We don't have, because I don't have the data flow, we don't have all those other objects, right? But you see I have a pipeline that I just numbered it for sequential, right? That this is going to be my driver, right? So pipelines perform two different type of high level activities, right? Is you could have a pipeline that is actually working with your data to change it, bring it in, whatever, right? And you could also have a pipeline. You could put this all in one pipeline, I suppose, right? I like to separate it. I have one that's a driver that orchestrates everything that's going on, right? So here, let me kind of pull that up real quick. Hopefully it'll come up and you'll see these are the steps that I want in this solution for everything to go through, right? It goes through my step one where it's calling to a pipeline to ingest my CSV files. And I'll show you what that does here in just a second. Then I want it to call a notebook that moves from what I call the bronze layer of what the CSVs, I bring them in just as they are. And I'm bronze to silver. All I did in this case was stand them up as delta tables, right? Because now I wanted to get it into something that I could work with. Didn't do a whole lot of work there. Depending on your standards, you could come up with, here's the amount of work we do from bronze to silver, or here's the type of things we do from silver to gold, right? Again, it's going to come up with how you set your standards up. And then I called another notebook to go from silver to gold, obviously.
Hey, Kevin, what
Yeah.
standards do you recommend for the silver and gold layers?
Well, I still thinking that that's going to be it depends on the solution answer.
Okay.
And honestly, I don't know that I have a good set down, on my own at this point. But I do like to take the approach of bind to bind to the schema as late as possible, right?
Yep.
If you could keep working with without having to change data over and force a schema, right? Whether it's your data, force the data type into a certain way. That's what I mean when I say binding to that schema. If you could do that as late as possible, that's going to mean that your whatever changes that come in from the source system is going to break as late as possible in your area. So you'll have everything still come in. So if we talk about like in bronze, the reason you bring it in as raw data and you don't do anything is because if they add a column, remove a column, change the data type of a column, and if you're just bringing it in from whatever the source system gives it to, then your bronze layer should never break, right? That's kind of, to me, one of the good reasons of why you want to bind as late as possible. Now, in the silver layer, I think you have to think about, do you want to bind two different data types at that point or not? And I've seen some people do that. I've seen some people wait and bind to the data types when they get to the gold layer. So, but sometimes there's going to be work that you need to do and you want those proper data types in the silver. And now you're just combining all of your data into what you want it to look like in silver. So let's take it as an example that you're using a change data capture process. So your raw is just going to be many small files, right, coming in from your change data capture. You may choose to bind to your proper data types because you know your source came from a database or something like that. Bind to it in silver, and then you're going to apply those changes from your bronze to the silver for what came in from your change data capture. Keeping enough information to get doing whether you're going to do your type 2s in silver or you wait till you do your type 2s. When I say type 2, you're slowly changing dimension ideas and stuff like that. So I think
See,
there's
I'll,
benefits of.
I'll say, Kevin, that
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to challenge you a little bit there. I
Okay.
like to bronze 100%. I'm all on board, right? Bronze should be
Mm-hmm.
whatever the source vomits out should go into bronze, right? So
Okay.
it's immutable. It is what it is. So if you got a dump that was all wrong, you should be able to go back to it and show like, hey, look, this is the garbage data we had at one point in time. I think that it makes more, or it makes sense to break a schema earlier in the load process to
Mm,
notify operations so that they can do something about it than to wait to go downstream in your processing. So if you have,
mm,
especially if you're working in like a lot of stuff, if you're talking about a multi-hour load or multi-hour process to go from one end to the other, I want to know as early as possible that some fundamental things like that are breaking, right? So I the first thing we do in silver is define to like the data set schema that we're talking about, that data type. Now I don't
mm-hmm.
like to break out into schemas until later. Um,
Okay.
uh, but I like to have data types in silver. I also like to have all of my hey, my surrogate keys are being applied, especially if they're business level surrogate keys, that we can define the type 1 keys, like, hey, this is always going to be this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that I like to have inside of my silver layer, as well as any business logic that is uh, completely encapsulated within a load of a silver piece. Now, there's some logic, it's going to be combining different things. Sometimes you include that inside of silver, sometimes a gold, but generally, rule of thumb is the business logic exists there. And then what goes into the gold layer is your modeling and any combination of business logic that's necessary when you're combining multiple dimensions or
Yeah.
multiple outputs. That's my preference for the logic
Yeah.
and rules.
And I could see that as being a good preference. I've talked to others that had thoughts of my way of or not. I'm not saying it's my way. I've done both of these, right? Because it again just is kind of looking at the solution and what makes sense at the time. I did like what you just flashed up there, Enterprise AR, the statement. So binding later would make it easier to troubleshoot when stuff breaks. I think it does, right? Um, but
I
your
go the
point,
other way, but that's
yeah, but breaking it earlier, right? Well, either way, if as long as you're separating out that you're not breaking, you're minimizing any breakage when you go into bronze, because troubleshooting back in the source system to me has always been the hardest.
100%.
So,
You don't have most data teams have very poor connectivity there, or limited or no connectivity, right? They're getting a
right.
file in, someone's sending it to them. They've got an API that's dumping it in. The ability to go back and validate is hard. But
Hmm.
so land whatever it is in bronze, and
Yes.
then do as many breaking things as early in the process as possible so you can then fix it as early as possible, right?
Yeah, and I think you may have just kind of changed my mind on how I would like to say this, because I think back to a lot of times as I was making that statement, because I was trying to have that as a general principle, but I find myself defining data types in silver more than not sometimes. So I think I need to kind of change my mindset a little bit.
It's also where I like to have my data cleansing,
Hmm.
right? So if you're going to be doing any cleaning, like you said about your dates or that type of thing, I like to have that inside my silver layer, as well as any overrides that I might have from users, right? So I always want to get the source be what the source is, but
Hmm.
for in those occasions where the source is just straight up wrong and we have no mechanism to change the source, I want that override capability to be in the silver layer so that it flows all the way downstream as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we'll jump back into some of the things that I put together for this. So
Yeah.
yeah, all interesting thoughts. So let's take a look at what I just named the first Lake House World Cup, kind of like on the previous one. And what am I? I'm definitely looking at the. So you can see I have in the files area, which is what I was considering the bronze area. I'll click on that folder. You can see I bring in all those CSV files just as is. And then in my first notebook, all I did was stand up all of those CSV files as Delta tables. It was just extremely easy. So I didn't do any of my cleansing in this solution, as we just kind of talked about. Maybe that the notebook 1 and notebook 2 that I have here could be combined so that you're doing more of the cleansing and the data type changes and things like that. So you see, I have just a very simple notebook. I have my list of tables that I'm going to work with. I have a function that I'm calling repeatedly that is just taking in parameters and, again, just taking the CSV file and simply standing it up as a Delta table. So then I could work with Delta tables, from that point forward. So that was one reason why I kind of thought about binding late into my, moving in this solution, right? Moving to silver and just making it stand up to make it easier to work with rather than CSV files. If you're doing everything in Python anyways, I'm going to go to 3, right? These two notebooks could have easily been combined together. Now, what I did do is I have, within this notebook, I have a section per table just to kind of make it easy on myself of the data
Mm-hmm.
changes that I did. And just for fun, the way that I did this, you notice I'm bringing pandas in because I wanted to have Data Wrangler help me write the code. And we'll get into that in another episode. But that's how I put this code together, is by playing with Data Wrangler and have it help me
Okay.
put everything together. So it made it super easy, super simple to do. And you can see here I was printing out what the schema would look, or what all the data types would look like as I changed this table. Stood it back up to in this case, I'm connecting to a lake house I called Gold. That's my default lake house, even though I'm reading in from Silver. Let's see if I could find here. This select statement, you can see, is reading in from the Lake House World Cup, but the default that I have set here is my Gold. So when I do this right, it's actually writing to the Gold Lake House. And then I just followed that pattern all the way through. So pretty simple. And
Wow.
again, if we go back to the workspace, I did do one thing to kind of make it easy here, is I set up a warehouse object just to give me an ETL control table for the this pipeline, that the pipeline just simply does a lookup against that warehouse, does a for each statement, and then runs a copy activity. And that's how everything is moved into the bronze layer.
Mm.
So again, just a pattern that I happen to think of and use here. We could bring the report up. Let's do our lineage view. I know we're probably running close on time.
We've got 6 minutes left,
Okay.
so just as a heads up, we're great conversation and good stuff going
So
on.
you'll see here, we have the same lineage view as before. Now we do on this one, because we have this notebook connecting to it. If I hit show lineage here, this actually shows how we're moving in this notebook from this one to, right, we're using both lake houses within this one notebook here. So this one kind of gives
Okay.
me a little bit better lineage view than I saw before. I'm not going to bring the report up. You could just trust me that the report works. Gave the exact same answers. used pretty much the exact same DAX. When I got to this point, I copied my DAX from one solution to the next. Okay. So this is the third pattern, right? This is going to be our lake house to data warehouse. You can see it has a little bit simpler setup. What I did do here is for simplicity, I have my bronze and silver. And if I look at my files, notice that this file shows it's a link. I did a quick shortcut to my other workspace in order to bring these files in rather than rewriting that pipeline, right? Yeah,
What?
it was
How'd you do that?
it. I would love to have unlimited time to put all these things together, but
Right.
but I could move my pipeline or rewrite my pipeline that did that same CSV into this workspace, right?
But wait, you shouldn't do that though. If you have it one place, you've written it. It's available. That's the beauty of OneLake. That's the beauty of the
Exactly.
solution is that you did it once, like so you can have the central team that can do and manage your bronze layer, that
Hmm.
can deal with all the troubleshooting and BS, but then many people can use it like
Yes.
this. Oh,
Yep.
this is awesome.
But then just to build the solution out, right? I used that same notebook that had the function in it. Or I used that same concept here. Build the tables that I just showed you here. All right, so let's go back to where I differed here. Is now we set up a warehouse that I just called gold, and in this case, hopefully it'll come up fast enough for us. I noticed the warehouse comes up a little bit slower, but in this case, what I did is I built out some stored procedures, some views, some queries, the things I would typically do in a SQL database. It may not have been the best practice in all cases here because I kind of did this one at the end and I was pushing to get it all done, right? But the point being is you could definitely build out. Uh, I don't know. I guess I'd better
Yeah.
report that. Um,
So
yeah.
honestly, this is incredibly valuable. So, and Mark is calling out, right? Like understanding how this works is super helpful, and Kevin showing this is great. Also, the error that you're having here, please, this is still in public
Hmm.
preview. They're having issues with stuff. I don't know. You heard me mention on the live stream I did on Wednesday, like my notebooks are just not working today, and they weren't. I literally was gonna like hop in and say like, why does yours work and mine doesn't? I was going to share my screen and show you my notebooks that didn't work on Wednesday. They now all do, right? I just ran them. They ran
Hmm.
fine. It's going to be a thing. It will get solved out, sorted out, guaranteed,
Yep.
right? So these bumps are going to occur in the road. We're going to roll with them. I bet Kevin closed his browser, went back in. It's going to be
Yeah,
fine.
I'm sure it will too. It all worked before, right? But
Mm-hmm.
just hopefully conceptually, right? We showed you different patterns, what you could do. We showed you that it actually does most work when you don't get an error that pops up. Yeah, so
Yeah.
hopefully, Mark, thank you for the inspiration on this. I'm glad it was valuable for you because you were my one target audience today. Hopefully everybody else likes it too. But
Well, so I gotta say, Eugene was talking about this on Twitter, like not knowing how to engage or what the end to end would be like. So, Mark, you're not alone. Lots of people are asking this, right? And I guess that's where your joke was coming
Mhm.
from too. All right, and then Cody has a good question here. Like, hey, can we spend more time with this scenario, lake house to warehouse, in a future session? And I'm gonna say
Oh,
yes. That's some.
definitely. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
some other conversations I have going around in the background, other things that I'm working on, that we're looking at lake house, the warehouse, and there's a couple things I'm learning from working with these other people as well. Um, and so yeah, I'll bring it back here when I can, and also there'll be other videos from in other platforms and stuff. But yeah, we'll definitely cover this a whole lot more. I do like the lake house to data warehouse pattern just because I like T-SQL a whole lot more than Python. But I'm pushing myself down the Python road a whole lot more. But that's me, right? Not everybody has to do that or should have to do that.
I'm several steps behind you, but I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm working on how do we get over to that new framework and move off of SQL, or at least adapt and start doing more with Python. Clearly there's a ton of use cases for that, and tons of resources out there. So I want to do that more. And Mark, I do want to point out that's why we're meeting here every week. Is we are learning this together. Come on the journey with us. We're excited to have it. Share this group out with your communities. Share this out for people that are looking to learn more about Fabric and Power BI and notebooks and data warehouses and lakehouses and all the good stuff that comes in there. We want to help each other go down this path. But we are out of time. Kevin, any parting words for our guests and our audience here?
Well, everybody in the US, enjoy celebrating the 4th of July, but also remember what it's about, right? It's not about the barbecues and everything. Surely have time with your family, but think about it for what it stands for as well, and have some of that thoughts while you're going forward. Everybody just have a great weekend. Keep safe. Me, I'm going to stay in the house because it's hot here in Texas.
I agree, Kevin. Have a great weekend. Check out Sound of Freedom. It looks like a great movie that's coming out. Something we can all get behind. And you guys have a great weekend. We will see you guys later. Peace. Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.